Before you actually,
Hello. Hello, and welcome back to Speak. Uh, Today we are joined by Simon Cassin, and I am so looking forward to having my mind bent. So, Simon, you're very welcome. Please just give us an intro about yourself and what it is that you would like to speak about.
okay, yeah. So my name's Simon. I've come from quite a practical background. I was in the army for a little bit, and then I was in the fire service for just less than 20 years. So I finished off as a station officer in Greater Manchester Fire Service, and yeah, I have this thing about if I'm going to do something, I want to know, does it work? In the army, I was a PE teacher, and so say I don't know, say 5 platoon needed to get fit for their battle fitness test. I'd have to make sure what I did with them achieved the goal, which was to pass their battle fitness test. So there was a kind of performance element to, results elements to what I did, and if enough people didn't pass, my boss would say, well, hold on, that's no good. We wasted time there. You've done the wrong thing. And in my life, I've done loads of sports coaching, and various things. Weightlifting. I used to be a weightlifting coach and a football coach, and yeah, loads of sports. That's always been a passion of mine. But in the fire brigade, it was the same. If we turn up to do a job and the job didn't go as well as we wanted to, we would go back and say, well, okay, what worked and what didn't? Why did we use jet instead of spray? Maybe we should have done this. Maybe we should have done that. And we reflected on it. And I actually wrote it was a debrief procedure for the fire service, which has been changed and modified and upgraded and made much better than what I did 30 years ago, or however long ago it was. It was a while ago now. Much better. It's obviously much better now, but I'm interested in performance. Does it work? I'm interested in that. And one of the it was actually like a sort of oh my God moment for me in my life was reading the report into the effectiveness of manual handling training, which I'm sure you've all heard of. That it is on average 0% effective at improving standards of manual handling. And it got me thinking, why do we keep doing things that don't work? We all know the Einstein quote, don't we? And it just sort of rings home, but we keep doing it. And that was in 2008. And then there was lots of stuff coming out, about oh yeah, so I was in the fire brigade a while. I was involved in an accident, and it's I won't go into that. And I was unwell physically and psychologically for a while, and then I had to reinvent myself. And then I reinvented myself in the health and safety world. That's what I did. But I came at it from a, well, does it work approach? You know what I mean? If I'm doing a session and it doesn't work, well, why keep doing it? It doesn't make sense to me. So we said that about the manual handling thing, and there was all these books coming out about behavioral safety and and all these nudge and all these various, and I was one of them, right, blinking heck, I need to know about these things. So I was reading them all. And then I thought, I'm not so sure this is, I'm not so sure I believe this stuff.
Hang on a second.
Hold on a minute. That seems a little bit too simple for me. So me being me, I thought, right. So I did a few like short courses like you do, and then I thought, no, not enough. So I signed up and did a degree in psychology because I thought, well, there's a lot of people talk about behavioral safety and behavioral science who've never studied psychology. So I spent, and it was a really cool degree. It was half psychology, 3 years psychology, and 3 years in philosophy. So what I did was I did the first 3 years psychology, and that gave me a much better understanding of what I was trying to understand, what people were saying. And it made me understand that psychology wasn't perhaps what I thought it was. I thought that research says 74% of people did this, meant that I should believe that. And then once I studied it, I realized that there were lots of problems with those assumptions from that. So it made me look at it differently. And then And then we look at it from a philosophical perspective. And philosophy works really well with psychology. It works really well because psychology has, it's a very broad subject, obviously, but it can give us enormous benefits and enormous insights. But the best psychology in the world can only tell us what something is. It can't tell us what something ought to be. 74% of people do this, right? And if that's true, is that good or bad? Well, psychology can't answer that. Nothing can answer that other than philosophy. Philosophy, and in particular ethics, is about what does good mean? Why is it good and why is it not good? And these ethical concepts and ethical principles and whatnot. Now, this is a massive problem we have. In our industry, we are monopolized by psychologists, and they keep telling us what things are. This is what it is. But there is almost no discussion about what they ought to be, which actually means it's pretty pointless finding out how something is if you don't know how it ought to be. And so then what we do is we have this kind of, they call it a non-inferential argument. So basically, well, I don't even need to justify why that's wrong. Well, you do actually. And you do need to tell me what is the moral argument that underpins, or the ethical argument that underpins your view of this. What is that? And we just don't give one. We just don't have one. We have, well, it's just wrong, isn't it? Okay, yeah, that's great if you're down the pub talking about who's got the best shirt on, but it's not great if you're a professional, because you should be able to justify what you're saying with some kind of reasoning. So that made me think, well, I need to do a bit more study here. So, I realized I didn't know enough about ethics. So I've just finished a master's in applied and professional ethics. And after 8 years of study, I've now got a much better idea of how little I know, which is just like, wow, I have no clue what you're going on about, but I'm completely comfortable with it now. Yeah, so I'm much better at that. It was really interesting when I said to my lecturer, okay, well, we're going to do the ethics of safety. And he went, well, there is no ethics of safety. There is no philosophical papers on philosophy. When I say there's no, I mean there's 4. Whereas if you want to know about the ethics of medical ethics, well, there's thousands. If you want to know about the ethics of engineering, there's hundreds, if not thousands. But there is none about safety. And there's no philosophy papers about safety either. Or very little, almost none. So when I did the dissertation, they said, well, we appreciate that you've basically got nothing to reference. So you just got to sort of make it up. It's a completely new field of ethics and a completely new field of philosophy, which is mind-boggling.
Like, that's mad, because we would definitely be like, we definitely speak a lot about being ethical and about safety being like a moral responsibility and all this stuff. But we, like, to your point, we never expand on that. We never go literally anything beyond, I don't think, that sentence of it's the right thing to do. So I am as surprised that there are, what do you say, only 4 papers ever in the world about it.
There's very few.
And we just, I suppose, expect that people just, like you said, just go along with it just because.
I think the thing that triggers in my mind as you were talking through is when I did my diploma, part of that is painstakingly going through and learning about precedent and case law, and an awful lot said by judges around, something was unethical, therefore I'm going to create this new precedent that somebody does, everybody does deserve like competent co-workers and welfare facilities, or whatever that might be. Lots and lots of judges, I think, have made ethical arguments that have created precedent, that have created legislation which we all hang our hats on. And so it feels like the foundation of this entire profession is built on ethics. So as you're talking and I'm thinking about you saying there is absolutely nothing, around the ethics of this profession, my mind is actually melting, because everything that I studied and the reason I fell in love with this, as genuinely somebody that, you know, I didn't have a career path. I fell in love with reading the ethical arguments, reading the precedents, reading what the judge said. That's enough. That can't happen anymore. And the fact that this is, you've got nothing to go on when you're writing about that is wild to me.
Well, what we do have some references in safety science, but what we do is we have scientists trying to tell us about ethics and they don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because so what you do is when you read through some of them, I won't say the names people, but you read through some of their stuff and it's wrong. But we don't have the competence on average across our industry to go, well, that don't make sense. You said that's utilitarianism, but it's not, it's consequentialism, and it's different. It's a different thing. But people can't, because we don't have that grounding, we're not really able to discuss it. There's some famous commentators who talk about safety ethics at the moment, and they talk about it in a way that no ethicists talk about it. Ethicists will just go, what are you going on about? It's just talking nonsense, mate. And then we have the same person say, well, okay, that's wrong to do that, but ethics is relative. Well, if it's relative, there is no right and wrong. There's only your view and my view. Relativism says something is not ethical in and of itself. It's only your opinion of it that defines its ethical nature. If that's the case, it's ethical to hurt people in the workplace if enough people think it's ethical to hurt people in the workplace. Relativism would have to accept that. But that's not what we mean when we say ethical, is it? We mean something different than that. We mean, well, I don't care where you are. You could be in blinking Bulgaria, or you could be in Bogota. I'm going to think places beginning with B now. Or you could be in Barcelona. That's just wrong. You just, that's just not right. Well, if that's the case, ethics can't be relative. It must be something else. I can't tell you exactly what it is, because there's lots of people, ethicists, who disagree on what it is. But you won't find an ethicist who says that ethics is relative. You just won't find one, because it isn't. There are some things that are just wrong, and that's it. I don't care what you say. So the point that I'm just trying to get across here is, unfortunately, our psychologists are the ones who are telling us about ethics, and we haven't had enough interaction with ethicists to help us understand ethics. And I think that's a mistake. So what I believe and what I would really like, I mean, how many people do you know? I mean, hundreds, thousands of people in the safety industry. How do you know them who've done a master's in some form of science, a master's in health and safety, or a master's in behavioral science, or a master's in, there's a lot, isn't there? And that's really good, by the way. I think that's fantastic. I really like that. How many do you know who's done a master's in ethics?
None.
None. And again, I would say it's because we believe that it's inherently ethical, like that the profession is. It does not make like it's like, oh, it just goes hand in hand, like, oh, it's this. and I as I'm saying, and I know I've no base for saying that other than a feeling of, we've always just said, yeah, sure, we are an ethical profession.
But we're not.
Yeah, no, I know.
We're not. So I just want to clarify, I don't believe health and safety professionals are trying to be bad. I don't.
No.
I genuinely don't. I think that the vast majority of people, and I'm a safety professional. Today I've been teaching managing safely. I do asbestos awareness, and that's what I do. I do consultancy. I'm an qualified asbestos surveyor, and I do the day-to-day. I don't just talk about ethics, but I always talk about ethics in the day-to-day job, because everything is related to ethics. Here's a good question to ask the next person who's a bricklayer or a plasterer or a grounds person. do you have a right to ignore the company's safe systems of work? That's an interesting question, isn't it?
My immediate reaction is yes. If you feel it puts you in any form of danger, yes, ignore the
Okay.
paper.
Like it. So if your safe system of work is not actually safe,
Yeah.
I have a right to say, I'm not doing that.
You're right.
But if your safe system of work is actually safe, do I have a right to go, I don't want to do that?
I think I would say it depends. I think everyone has a right to, because it's a free world and you have the right to do whatever you want, really.
No, you don't, Crystal. No, you don't. Just to clarify, I do not have a right to go in your house anytime I want to, do I?
No, that's true. I mean, the context that you laid out in terms of it being a workplace, I think if somebody says, I don't want to do that task,
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to stop them, whether they have the right to or not. I suppose is the question you're asking, and a different question. But for me, it would depend on the context, which is I could have a very good safe system of work, but it's been designed for the average person, and you're talking about somebody with a disability or somebody that can't engage with the process in the same way. Again, back to, if it puts you in harm's way, you don't believe you can execute the safe system of work in a safe way, I would say yes. But I also, with that, think when you write those processes, I also have a really inherent belief that those processes don't actually keep anybody safe. It's how we teach somebody what the process really is, and the piece of paper is just a document to prove what we taught somebody or what we've put in place. So I just think it's a really interesting point. But I think there are so many occasions where if somebody said, I'm not doing that, Crystal, I would be completely comfortable with it if it's around their genuine inability to engage with it, or that it puts them at risk.
So let's think about this. Right. In our company, we've said every time you use leaning ladders, this is just an example, every time you use leaning ladders, you must use the ladder restraint equipment. It's non-negotiable. If you have to use two hands to carry out a task, hold there, hit it with a nail, whatever I do, you have to use the ladder restraint equipment. Okay. Does our engineers have a right to go, I don't want to do that. I don't think I need that. I'm not going to do it. That's the kind of question. Does a plasterer or an electrician have a right to say, I don't want to look at the asbestos register before I start work? I don't want to do it, so I'm not doing it.
Immediately my brain goes into, and this is why your calls used to fry my brain, because it makes you question every single part of what you're saying. I automatically start going into, oh, what do we mean by right? What do we mean by the right to? And does that change in the context of home and work? And what do we mean by the right to? Can somebody do it? Yes, of course they can. They have the ability to say, bog off, I don't like it. Do they have the right? And I'm thinking your ladder example is really good. I worked in telecoms and we had the Tetra system, and it was, you use it. It's as simple as that.
I don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we would really take people to task if they didn't, with no good reason. Obviously, again, back to the, if you are at risk in some way or it doesn't work. But we would genuinely take people to task if they ignored what we had designed and put in place for their safety. So yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
When you ask that question to your everyday, we need, our builders and our plumbers and our electricians, they all say, well, I might choose not to. Yeah, but there's a difference between a choice and a right.
Yeah,
I might
that's right.
choose to do something, to drive on the wrong side of the road, but it doesn't mean I'm not, I have a right to choose what side of the road I'm going to be on, and then everyone else get out of the way. It doesn't work like that, does it?
No.
So there's a difference between a choice and a right, which is really interesting. Now, the whole idea of regulations and obligations, we can't have that conversation unless we know what a right is. What is
Exactly.
it? Where does it come from?
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have to understand moral philosophy. Because if you go down and understand it, where's your argument? I haven't got one. Yeah, I can't. We cannot discuss it because we don't have the words. Is it because we're not clever enough? No way. It's not because we're not clever enough. We've got some super bright people doing safety and super practically bright and, you know, problem solving. We've got some great people, but we've focused too much in one way and we've left ourselves struggling over here. We really have. So, so today we was going to have a bit of a chat about human factors, weren't we?
We were.
Yeah. Okay. And it's all joined together, by the way. Okay. It's all connected.
There was a
Right.
plan, Simon. There was a
There's a
plan.
plan which we can carry on talking about ethics if you like, or do you want to have I mean, it might get a bit squishy.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do
Human
you want to
factors.
do squishy? Okay, right. So I'm interested. Okay, I think a lot of our conversations about safety ethics is about the employer, is about the you know, the business owner, the senior managers, the C-suite. A lot. Well, that lot over there, they don't care. They're just paying lip service to it. I think there's a lot of that. A lot of conversations about ethics is focused in that way. But I don't think we do. I don't think we talk about, for example, health and safety people today have been delivering manual handling training that researchers said doesn't work. Is that okay? Is that all right? Is it? Because I don't think it is. I don't think that's right. Because if I was a doctor and I said, come to me and I will charge you for a private service that actually won't make you better, you'd say, well, that's not right.
Mm.
So what's the difference? So this gets me into this. So I approach this thought of human factors initially when I did my psychology studies. I was interested particularly in change and change management and human factors, but change management in particular. And I started 10 years ago trying to learn about this. And one of the things that I developed a change management program called the water model, and it was tested and it's used and and it's used by one particular client, a big client, and you know, they still use it to they still use it. But what I realized was that actually the model that I designed can also help us in other areas. So this is all attached to philosophy, you see, because philosophy made me think differently. So we have talked about, do you remember ought implies can?
Yeah.
No.
It's honestly, it's 3 words that change the world completely. It's just like, oh my goodness me, there's a part of the world I didn't know existed. These 3 words are amazing. So it goes like this. Immanuel Kant came up with it and he said, well, okay, because I ought to do something, so that's a kind of moral judgment, that's the right thing to do, it implies that I can. So there's an interesting question here. If I cannot do something, can I be morally obliged to do something that I cannot do? That's the question to you. Can I have a moral obligation to do something that I cannot do?
I don't think so.
I see what immediately comes to my mind is perception and people's perceptions of what they can or cannot do.
Yeah.
Like they perceive, like, oh, I can't do anything. It's like you actually probably can have a lot more power than you realize and you can do more.
Yeah.
Therefore, you ought to do more.
Yeah.
That's what springs to my mind when I hear that. But it also then brings up for me a conversation Crystal and I had, I don't know how many episodes ago, but we were talking about like accountability and responsibility, but it's that thing like accountability of like, yes, you should be accountable if you're able to.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes. Yeah. You need to be. Yeah. You need to have the ability to
have the
execute
ability. That was it. Yeah.
what you are accountable for. Yeah.
Seems to make sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Hold on a minute. You, Crystal, you're responsible for third world debt. Well, all right then. Yeah, fair enough. But I need some help here. I can't just do it from the kitchen. You know, I'm going to need some help. I can't actually do it. You know, so we can't say, "Oh, blinking heck, Crystal, you know, you're morally obliged to do it, and you haven't done it, kid." We can't hold you morally responsible for that, can we? Now that's really interesting because that got me thinking, and there's a thing called a contraposition. And what you do is you move the words around. So ought implies can. Kant's argument, and this is a very simple version of it, was you cannot be morally obliged to do something you cannot do. That's what Kant was saying. Yeah, which is what you
Fair.
just said about responsibility.
Yeah.
It's the
In the truest sense of I can't, like I actually cannot.
I actually cannot do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So now let's flip it around. If I can do something, does that mean I am morally obliged to do it? Let me give you an example. I've got 10 quid in my pocket, and I can give that 10 quid to somebody who has less money than me, who is more impoverished in the world, and there's blinking squillions of those around. Because I can give somebody £10, does that mean I am morally obliged to do so? What do you think?
I think
does this come down to, again, like perceptions or people having different moral, like, baselines or whatever?
You are completely right, but that's a separate conversation.
Okay, right. Keep me on track before I go off.
No, if we have a general concept of of morality, of something good or bad, because we could
I could give, so should I give is like the crux of what you're saying, right? If you can give,
because you have got a tenner in your pocket, it means that morally you're obliged to give it to somebody who hasn't got any money. Is that true? Kant said, no, it isn't true. No, it isn't. There may be cases where we could argue for that, but you can't automatically, because it implies, because I've got the tenner, it implies that I should give the tenner to somebody who's got less than me.
Do you know what? We had an epic discussion, Simon, actually, over a very long drive and a dip in a hot tub about something that Elisa is massively passionate about and posts about, and is really inspiring to listen to when she's talking about the Palestine Gaza situation. And we were having a discussion about, essentially it was that it's moral. We should be posting, people should be using the power there, and they're actually bringing pain and discomfort, right, about all the amount of people that are not doing this because they should. And actually it was a long, wicked day. And the crux of where it came to, and I was very much reflecting on this question, Simon, which is, because I can post, shout, share, watch, intake the material, I'm challenging myself with Elisa's words, which is like, so this means I should be doing this. And then I was thinking about the parts of this and about the materials. When people say it's there to watch, you should be abreast of the situation. And I was thinking about, actually, that would be highly traumatic for me and probably very triggering. And actually, I think I'd probably do myself some damage. And then I was thinking about, what we ended up getting to is everybody picks a thing. Actually, there are so many moral things that we should be doing that everybody has the capacity to engage in. And whether that is saving lives, campaigning, stopping poor treatment, whether it is absolutely lifting the profile of monstrosities and terrible, terrible war crimes that are going on in the world, everybody has a capacity to pick a thing. But it doesn't mean because you have the capacity to do, you technically or practically could do something to do with every single thing that comes your way, you end up just burnt out and broken. And we ended up in this pool overlooking the forest, and I think Elisa came up with a line with, I guess everyone just has to pick their thing, the thing that they can do, the impact they can have. And it's not about impacting and doing all of it, but it is like, actually, if I'm over here doing my bit and you're over here doing your bit, we're actually impacting two areas in a really substantial, big way. And I would say that conversation, and I hope that's not an overshare, Elisa, that conversation for me it sat in my consciousness for weeks. And I was thinking about the can, the should, and the am I a moral person if I say I absolutely can consume that, I physically can consume that, but I think it would break me. And is that okay? Does that make it not like, does that change it? And it gets
It
back to
does
my
change it. It does
yeah.
change it, Crystal, and it changes. It significantly changes it. So
Mm.
I'll just say this, and then if you want, I'll carry on about human factors, or we can talk about ethics. We can do whichever you want.
Sorry, we ended up just getting there, but I think it
Well,
was
it's
just
okay. It's great. It's really
yeah,
good. You see, this is one of the problems we've got with ethics. We can't discuss it because we don't have the on average, and that's on average. That's not that we're not clever enough, because we are. All right,
yeah,
there's no doubt about that, and it's not because we don't care, because we do.
we
So
do.
you can just take that right out the window. It just that we don't understand concepts such as moral demandingness. We can be overly morally demanding. And there is lots of studies and lots of papers that talk about where do we find that? Where actually does this ought sit?
Yeah,
And we could talk about that. We could talk about it now for 6 weeks and we get to some kind of understanding about it. The
yeah,
point that that was great what you shared with, by the way. And do you know what it shows? It shows that ethics is part of almost everything we do.
yeah,
Almost everything, but not everything.
yeah,
All value judgments, almost all value judgments, and almost all decisions and actions, and I'm going to choose A instead of B. Almost all of those are rooted. They go back to the fundamental bit that it means to be human, and that is morality. It starts from there. Yeah. It starts from the value of human life, or the value of animal life, our rights, our human rights. It starts from there. And everything else, not everything else, it's a too broad a statement, but most other things are attached to that.
yeah,
All ideas should be attached to something bigger than themselves until they come to a singular idea or an intrinsic value, and everything should go back to that, which is, again, psychology can't answer that for you. It can't help you with it. We have to know about Descartes, and we have to know about Aristotle, and we have to know about Miranda Fricker, who's a modern female philosopher who's just ace. She's just like amazing. And there's loads of really good ones out there as well. And I tell you what, a lot of our really top philosophers now are women, which is brilliant. So anyway, I just got distracted slightly there. The point that I'm trying to say is all safety is ethics. That's all it is. Okay. Law is society's interpretation of right and wrong. Well, that's ethics.
yeah,
Rooted in ethics.
yeah,
That's what it is. You can take it almost always all back to that, because that's where it starts.
yeah,
But we can't talk about it. So just getting back to the human factors thing. Okay. So is it a new thing? Well, the HSC have been telling us professionals, that we should be thinking about human factors when we're doing risk assessments, when we're planning work, when we're writing safe systems of work, when we're investigating accidents and doing near-miss investigations and all these things, plentiful things that we do. We should be considering human factors. Let's be honest. How many people do you know who have a structured approach to considering human factors when they write risk assessments?
Very few.
very few.
So I'm going to say this: shame on us.
You're
Shame
right.
on us. Okay? Because those people out there who we're telling we're heroes and we're going to save you, shame on us, because we're letting them down. We're letting them down because the enforcement authority in the UK have been saying, we should be right, lads and lasses, you need to look at this. And we've gone, yeah, we're too busy. We're doing this. We're not going to do it. But hold on a minute. Let's give us a bit of a break here. Okay. There is a problem with it, in so much as it's the models that I'm aware of are quite onerous and they're quite difficult. And there's so many different versions. Which is the right version? Which isn't? What works and what doesn't? And it's, well, hold on a minute. I just want him to dig a hole in the back garden. I've got to do human factors. So I think we have to also give ourselves a little break here as well. Let's not be overly demanding, but we do help people do things that are dangerous. We do, and we help them to do them, and so that they don't get harmed. And there's some dangerous stuff.
That's right.
I'm going to park that there a minute now. So there it is. It's hanging over here. And now we're going to go to or implies can. Okay. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, right. I'm going to ask you some questions. If there's something I want somebody to do, if it is not possible for them to do it, will they do it?
No.
No.
Now that's simple, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. So what we need to do is we need to say, what do I want people to do? So we need to understand the behaviors that are involved and the decision making and whatever. And what are the factors that can influence the thing that I want them to do, that can influence the possibility of me doing it? Okay. I want you to do this. And these behaviors, the critical behaviors, we'll call them, you need to do these critical behaviors in order to be safe. Yeah? Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Right. So I know that we ask people to follow safe systems of work that it is not possible for them to follow. Really? Yeah, I know we do. Yeah, it's absurd, but we keep doing it. Why? Well, we've got no model to actually ask ourselves the question. Now let's ask ourselves a second question. This is ought implies can, by the way. Can implies ought implies can. Okay, so can is possible, ought is preferable. Let me explain what I mean. It is possible for you to do something. Yeah, you've got all the various components and all the factors required to carry out a behavior. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't want to carry out the behavior. So if something isn't possible, it won't happen. If something isn't preferable, it's unlikely to happen.
Yep.
Got it?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That is all implies can turned into human factors. Ask yourself this: whatever you want anyone to do, is it possible for them to do it? And if the answer is no, it won't happen. Simple as that. It's really simple, isn't it?
Yeah, logical, right?
It's really simple.
They can't do it, they won't do it.
Okay.
And if it's not preferable, it's highly fucking unlikely they're going to do it.
Exactly. So
Which is
now
why-
let's ask questions about possibility and preferability. And these are now we've got loads of different models out there, and there's probably 1,000 models. I don't even know what they are. Okay. And they might be amazing, they might be rubbish. I can't make any comment on that. But based on the ones that I have seen, and I haven't just watched it on YouTube. I spent years reading these things and behavior change models and looking at them and going, I like that. I don't like that. That doesn't work. That won't work for me. Okay. So what I've designed is what's called the possible and preferable model. It can be carried out by an operative as a dynamic risk assessment, and it can be carried out in a minute. You just ask yourself 19 questions. Have I got that? Have I got that? Have I got that? Have I got that? I haven't got that. That's not relative. That's not relative. That's relative. And I haven't got it. Or I have got it. And you can do it in a minute or 2 minutes at the most. It's really quick and simple. Or if I'm a safety person or a manager and I want somebody to do something, I look at the critical behaviors and I can go into a bit more depth and spend a little bit more time into the possible and preferable model. If I want to do a big change piece, a significant amount of change, I can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I can give you 40 pages on each of the, it's there. It's underpinned by research and references and all that. I can go into that level if you want. Now let's look at this. This is really cool. Right. So let's imagine we could capture common factors that influence safety. Yeah. One of the categories that I have in the possible and preferable model is time. Is it true that often people cannot follow safe systems of work, for example, because to do so would take, we'll just make an imaginary time, would take an hour. But if I take an hour, I don't meet the customer deadline. So now what I've got is competing considerations.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So it's not possible for me to meet the deadline and do it safely. I can't do it. We leave our people answering these questions on a daily basis without considering what's called competing considerations. The possible and preferable tool says, what are these competing considerations that are likely to happen? What are they? Okay. So what you do is you gather the data. Say I'm designing something new. Right? I think that might be an issue. That might be an issue. And the way I've designed it is I've designed my scoring of that on the five-step Likert scale. So what I can do, like strongly disagree, agree, that one.
Yep.
So I'm saying how confident am I in that answer, and I score it. And then what I can do is I can then convert that to a questionnaire, and I can send that questionnaire to all the people who do the job and say, what do you think? And they can answer strongly. I can do this, or I strongly agree I can do it. You know what I mean, don't you?
Yeah.
And then they can come back. And now what I've got is I've got my opinion and their opinion on the possibility and preferability of a task. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Now let's do this. Now let's do an accident and incident investigation. And let's look at the behaviors that were carried out, that we wanted people to carry out, or behaviors that people did carry out. Now, if we use the possible and preferable tool, we're gathering more data. So what we can do is we can learn about common problems that we might have relating to human factors when we design work. And what we learn about those common human factors can also help us when we're thinking about what caused accidents or contributed to accidents. Okay, and we can start gathering that data. What we can also do is investigate quality issues using the same data points. We can any behavior has got these common data points. So what we're doing is when we've got a quality problem, we'll investigate it and we gather the data and it comes into one pot. When we do safety, we put it into the same pot and we find we've got problems with quality, we've got problems with safety. And do you know what the problem is? The training's crap. Training's not good enough. There's a lack of support. We're not giving people enough guidance, and things like that. Sorry, that was just like an etc. at the end of it, wasn't it? I'm just thinking I'm talking too much here. And they can all come together. Right, now this is really important. Okay, why do we need to use human factors? Well, it's because we as professionals, we are duty bound to serve society. And what that means is the way we do our work must meet what I call the 3 E's. It must be effective, it must be economical, and it must be ethical. If it's not those 3 things, it's not professional. If we don't consider human factors, we are failing in our effectiveness of our management of health and safety. And I think it's unprofessional to do that. So it's all tied, and it all takes us back to this central thing. If safety really is important, and I think it is, I really do, I genuinely do. I'm like you lot, I'm not having it. People out there breathing in crap, I'm not having it. Yeah. It's not happening. I'm the same as you, but I'm coming at it from a philosophical perspective rather than the mass perspective that we've got. We say we want different views, and it's true that if we have more, for example, in our industry, more women, more people from different ethical backgrounds, people maybe with disabilities and different life experiences, I completely agree we need that. But thinking differently means not just different perspectives. It means thinking differently.
Yeah.
Philosophers don't think like anybody else. They see things differently. But we don't like them. Why? Because they talk, what are you going on about? Shut up, go away. We don't like them because they make us feel confused, and we don't like that. So we just ignore them. If you go around to, and I'm not saying any conference in particular, go to anyone you want. It's controlled by psychologists. Now, it's really interesting because all of them can tell us how something is, but not one of them can tell us what it ought to be. And until we can do that, we've got a problem. Because what's our foundation? I don't know if this is making sense, or I'm rambling here, there, and everywhere. It makes sense to me. I feel like maybe I'm rushing it a little bit or something.
No, you're absolutely fine. I think the silence, which is actually is not very often that there is a speak episode where me and Elisa are silent for a fair amount of it, and it's because I think you are, the way you present your argument is you're both sides. You ask the question and then you answer it, because the question is probably new to us and audience, and then so far, and so is the answer, and you are the most credible person to ask that question and probably study those questions. I think that's our silence. So I think we are just taking you in terms of the validating some of the things that I've picked up on and that I love is right at the beginning, where I was saying about the ethical arguments, the precedent set by judges, etc. And you're like, the profession is ethical, the legislation is built on ethical judgments or ethical decisions. Those things sit wonderfully, and I love the whole thing around human factors. And you said about how disgraceful risk assessment is. I actually have a real bee in my bonnet in general as a professional about the fact that we write generic risk statements and generic control statements, and then we give them to somebody that's not a professional to then execute. And we never go back when we write that little residual risk bit, what's supposed to be left, like we'll give a little score or a red, amber, green, or whatever it's supposed to be, all based on our view of what that risk is, and it's managed based on these generic controls. We don't go back and we don't say, did that work? We don't say, how much did that control manage that risk? We don't say, is there more that we can do? Is there deeper we can go? Do we understand it enough? And we really don't say. We had a great podcast with Sunny Atwell where we were talking about, even when controls are finished, we're not good at going back and saying that training is now ineffective. This hazard, as we understand different things. So I think we are a profession built on old school process, and that's what drives this compliance garbage that's everywhere. But yet we are having this sort of silver lining around our profession, around, we know actually in our gut that the standard processes that we turn out do not necessarily manage our risk, and we need to get better at that. So I know it's not in your philosophical.
No, it is, Crystal. I've got, because sorry if I'm being rude. It's so exciting. Right, listen. Okay, what if everything we did, we saw it through the perspective of an argument? I believe that this is a hazard. So in the way that critical thinking says, well, this is what I believe, this is my conclusion, and this is why I believe it. Yeah, I've got premises. This is my conclusion, this is a hazard, and this is why I believe it's a hazard. Okay. So if we did risk assessments as an argument, we would see it differently, because what we'd have to do is we'd have to give reasons to believe that this control measure will reduce risk. We don't do that at the moment. We just go, yeah, I'm training. Right, brilliant. Yeah. Where's your reasons to believe that training will work?
I think that's one of the things when the appreciative investigation or proactive investigation of work got really sexy, and the now statement that's getting a little bit like a plaster statement, which is like, design risk with the end user, and everyone just sort of says that, but do we really? And do we really create the space to discuss the task that we are breaking down and create a process around it? And I was thinking about, as you were saying that, my most precious thing I think around proactive investigation of work is we as desk-based professionals will spot something and say that is a hazard, or that is a control, or that's the way to do it. And I really love having a discussion where you say to somebody, I think that's a hazard, and they just think you're mental. They're like around that every day. And then you go down this like rabbit hole of, you know, how often do you have to see a hazard before you get complacent to it and it becomes wallpaper and you don't actually see that as a problem, and like all these like myriad of brain explosions that you cause in my face, Simon, all the time. But my main thing is the discussion about what is dangerous and what is not dangerous. It is two-way, because from the frontline perspective, they're saying, this is what I do every day, this is how I feel, this is how I control my risk, how I keep myself safe. But the other side, that ethical piece, I love to talk about law in a very different way, and not about something that we have to abide by because otherwise we get done. That the law was created off the back of somebody dying typically, and a group of people, lots of people dying, and some judge somewhere said that's enough. That creates a precedent. It goes into an act or a regulation or whatever. And it's a way of telling us professionally that there is risk, and sometimes you can be completely ignorant to what the risk is. So, you know, there is regulation around asbestos, there is regulation around noise. There was going to be a point in time where people were just like, well, noise is noise, and we just accepted people going deaf. And then we understand more of it, we dig deep, we do science, we create law, whatever. So I love that you can have a two-way argument to say, actually, we do know in a different, wherever you might work, let's just say like automotive garage, right? I work in this environment every single day, and these are my 5 hazards. I'm the worker. Well, actually, I know from working at another automotive place that this and this also has caused significant harm. So although you don't see it as hazardous, I know it is. So it is two-way. And I don't think you can say the desk can do it on their own and well, or the frontline can do it on their own and well. But I do think the frontline would do a better job at knowing exactly what affects them, and they will have seen the real life work on the worst day, in the worst weather, with the least time, and they will genuinely be able to tell you how people typically get hurt, and we won't be able to see that.
So if you think of a safe system of work as an argument, think of it like this, right? So I believe that if you follow this method of work to complete your task, whatever that might be, put a new roof on or whatever, I believe this. I believe that if you follow that, this safe system of work will be safe. And if it's an argument, I have to give you reasons why you should believe my argument.
Yeah.
So if we turn it into a critical thinking process like that, that's what I believe. This is a safe system of work, and this is why I believe it. Now we're going to have to think about why we believe why we believe that safe system of work is suitable and sufficient. In order to help us do that, we need to think about human factors.
I think it's although you're using the phrase safe system of work, I'm immediately thinking about the controls that we come up with on that risk assessment you mentioned at the beginning, and the human factors impact on those. If it is an argument when you're doing a safe system of work, or when you're doing what a risk assessment meant to do, which is highlight risks to the people that you're talking about or trying to protect. But I love the amount of times that I've gone through a risk assessment on site back in the days that I would like wander around, document everything, and write what I thought was a control. And then you speak to somebody and say, I'm going to recommend these like 10 actions. And they very quickly tell you just how they just won't work. Actually, will probably make life more difficult. They'll get left behind. And I think that it's not just a safe system of work. I think it even comes down to when making recommendations about what a control is, because that's not going to work, Crystal, because we do that task 50 times a day and that weighs 10 kilos, and actually that's going to be terrible. Okay, so my control is
possible for someone to follow the control measures. Well, it's possible, but I tell you what, it's a pain in the bum, so I'm not doing it. It's
probably not going to do it.
There you go. If you ask yourself those 2 questions, you don't need to know about all the stuff there's a lot of stuff behind it. If you want or you can just have the basic model. You can do any model you like, But just ask yourself this: what do I want them to do? And is it possible for them to do it? And straight away, your practice will change. Now ask yourself, is it preferable? And if the answer is no, or I'm not sure, it's probably not going to be done, whatever it is you want them to do.
And to be clear, that preferable is for the person doing the job, not for
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's, but I don't know if I explained it properly or well enough, but it's come from ought implies can,
mhm.
can implies ought. It was oh, hold on a minute. Look at all the health, most of the, I would say all, because I haven't seen them all, but many human factors models don't even talk about social media. Does social media influence behavior? Yes. You
100%.
show me a human factors model that asks about social influence, because I don't know one. Oh no, I do. I know one. You tell me one that actually considers ethical dilemmas as a factor that influences behavior. You show me one of those that other than says values. Show me one that actually talks about it. Well, I can show you one. I've got one. Show me one that talks about the power of peer influence. Show me the one that comprehends behavior as an outcome of more than one person. It is group agency. Show me one, because it imagines all thoughts and behaviors are individual. That's just not true.
Yeah.
So what we've got that I'm aware of, and that doesn't mean there's not amazing stuff out there, I'm just ignorant to it, doesn't actually represent humans. It's not actually human. It's, we've said it's human, but it isn't actually human. And we've got to up our game, and because if we don't, we're not effective, efficient, and therefore ethical. And therefore we're letting ourselves down. You can be as passionate as you want. You could be like completely, whoa, it's coming out of every orifice. But if it don't work, what's the point? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that the profession as a whole, I think, could really start to sit on about, and we mentioned a couple of examples about those controls that you take out when they don't work anymore. We're not very good at going back and saying something I did say doesn't work, and whether it's control, training, say system of work, whatever. And then also we do this horrible thing where we retrain people. When it goes wrong, we don't ever look at ourselves and say, is it possible? Did we design it correctly? Is it right? Does it work? Does it work? We just retrain them on the thing that we told them to do in the first place. And we're like, you are wrong. So you will go back to the piece of paper that I designed with no consultation with you whatsoever, and with no consideration of human factors, social media, groupthink, whatever. And we're just going to remind you of what we wrote, because we were very hardworking and wrote that bit of paper. It blows my mind. Like, it blows my mind.
So we need to ground it to something strong. We need to develop critical thinking skills, and we need to adopt a philosophical mindset that says, because when everything I'm saying to you, I've asked myself, how am I wrong here? Philosophy says, tell me why you might be right and tell me why you might be wrong. You have to argue against yourself. And that's
I don't think my brain has the capacity
really
to do both sides
healthy.
of that argument.
My brain does not have the capacity. And I've had this conversation with you before, Simon. I'm like, no, I'm resisting it. Which I think goes back to your point of why people don't like philosophers, and because it's uncomfortable and it's really challenging and we don't like it. I am going to wrap it up, because guys, people's commute is not as long as this, and I know the two of you could. I'm just sitting here listening and I'm taking it all in, enjoying it, but the two of you could go for hours. This has been fabulous. This has been unreal. I have really enjoyed it, and I think absolutely, Simon, you'll have to come back for another episode. We might do like a problem statement right in from the start. I just feel like there would never be enough time.
There would never ever be.
I just feel like we could just
And we haven't even talked about epistemology and what does knowledge mean? What does
Oh, we
truth
haven't
mean?
even touched on it. Like we could just do like a philosophy series. But anyway, we're gonna wrap it there.
Okay.
This
Close
has
it.
been
Good luck with your trip in Berlin. I've never been to Berlin, but I've been told it's beautiful, it's wonderful, and you're doing an amazing work. And I wish you all the best going forward. I just think, honestly, it's just brilliant seeing how well you're doing. So keep up your amazing work anyway. You're doing a cracking job.
Oh,
thanks,
thank you.
Simon.
See
Thanks
you
so much.
guys. See you later. Bye.
Yeah.